And our next keynote speaker is someone who's quite literally sitting at the center of that process. It is my profound privilege to introduce Matt Travis, who's the Director and Chief Executive Officer of the CyberAB. And for those that aren't familiar with CyberAB, it is the sole authorized non-government partner of the United States Department of Defense. And CyberAB's responsibility is for implementing and overseeing the entire CMMC conformance regime. In particular, it accredits the C3PAOs that can assess you. Before leading the CyberAB, Matt served as the first Deputy Director of CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, where he oversaw a $2 billion, 2,000-person organization driving cybersecurity and national resilience across the country. He is also a former naval officer and a seasoned national security professional. Today, he leads the organization, as I mentioned, that accredits the C3POs that will assess your readiness. There's truly no one better positioned to help us understand how CMMC will unfold in practice. And I like to say in seriousness that in our industry, Matt Travis is a rock star. So please join me in welcoming Matt Travis. And as you look at him, you'll see what a rock star looks like in the CMMC world. So welcome again. Thank you for joining, Matt. And we're looking forward to your presentation and your comments.
Hey, Sanjeev, great to be with you. Thanks for the invitation to come back to the annual summit, and thanks to your whole Prevail team. Although I'm not sure why you need me. I'm certainly not a rock star. You just had Michael Gruden, and he knows more about CMMC than I do. So I will try to add some value to the audience, but I very much appreciate the time. And to your point, I think it's important not just to understand the legal framework, but also how does it actually work from a practical perspective. So I've got a few slides that I'll walk through if everyone can see them. I always have to start off with the disclaimer that nothing that I say, as Sanjeev said, we are not part of the Department of War or the U.S. government. We're an independent accreditation body. So don't construe anything you hear from me as Pentagon policy or any U.S. government position. So I want to talk just through a few talking points, and Sanjeev talked about who we are and what we do, so I won't bore you with that. We do a lot of things in terms of the CMMC ecosystem, but the most important thing is just what Sanjay says. We authorize and accredit the CMMC third-party assessment organizations, and if nothing else, we exist to ensure the competency of those assessments, the impartiality of the assessors and the C3POs, and the consistency so that every defense contractor who's seeking certification can expect to receive the same type of treatment, the same process and procedure across the country. We do a lot of other things in terms of the town halls and marketplaces. We currently own the CAICO, which certifies the individual assessors and instructors. But again, we really exist to ensure the integrity and instill trust and confidence in CMMC. And I think it's important to come back to why are we doing this? A lot of people, when they think about federal rulemaking, they think, well, it's just another excuse for the government to tell us what to do. And that's often the case when you look at the Federal Register and you just see a lot of different rules. There are certainly a lot of things that the government compels people to do, whether they like it or not. This is a bit different, CMMC. This is, and Sanjay, I think you said it correctly, this is really a new trust relationship between the Pentagon and industry. And what this CMMC rules compel is not that you must do something, is if you want to do business with the Department of War, if you want to be their business partner, then you need to meet a standard in cybersecurity. And why? Because as I think we all know, the compromise of important information that CUI or even FCI continues to be exfiltrated, compromised and potentially using that to be for sabotage or reverse engineering. And so it is a national security program. As I've often said, people enjoy many things about being a defense contractor. It's a terribly important mission. If you do it right, you can make some decent money doing it. It's exciting to be part of the fight, so to speak, and supporting the warfighter. Well, this is supporting the warfighter. And so it's not just the government trying to get in the weeds about how you do cybersecurity. It's literally to protect our national interest for the warfighter. So in that context, the Pentagon initially required this as a contract term and condition, and too many of you out there kind of blew it off. And then the Pentagon said, okay, well, we're going to require you to log into a government portal and self-assess and report your actual scores. And it was clear after a while that that wasn't working either. And so the best really way to ensure conformity of cybersecurity is to have a third-party certification, which is exactly what CMMC does, which is why we're here where we are now. I think Michael covered well, that rulemaking, but I just want to stress, there was so much twists and turns once the CMMC program was announced. There were strategic pauses. There was 1.0 and then 2.0, and no shame if some of you in the audience kind of stopped paying attention to CMMC. And if there's one message I hope you take away from today's annual summit, is that we're there. This program is up and running. The mandatory component of it is going to be taking effect very shortly, and there is no turning back. And that's not said for me just being an advocate of the mission here. It's really just practical advice that if you have been kind of not paying attention, it is now not only in your best interest, it's in your really your business livelihood to get on board and get with the program, as they say. That 32 CFR Part 170 rule that established CMMC as a program, that went into effect last 16 December. And so shortly after that, we actually have level 2 certification assessments starting. They've been going on really since late February when we had all of the administrative templates in place. And we have now a few hundred certification assessments level 2 that have been occurring. And as we'll see here in November 10th, even if the government's still shut down, that 48 CFR, which gives the Department of War the authority to make this a mandatory requirement in terms of not conforming to NIST 800-171 Rev 2. You already have that requirement in most cases. This is what's going to make the assessment, the certification, either by C3POs or DIBCAC, mandatory for those who have those CMMC clauses in their contracts. And so 10 November is just, 2 weeks away? And even if the government's still shut down, that rule will enter into force. There might not be anyone to man the contracting officer desk to enforce it right away, but make no mistake, this is on its way to the final codification of the full vision of the program, which I think is great news for all of us who have been following the program and being a part of it. I just want to stress, and I came in middle of Michael's presentation. I'm sure he talked a lot about the False Claims Act. That's not just legal theory. And so what I want to just stress is, before I get to that, let me just talk about the levels, because there's one thing I think that's not talked about a lot in terms of CMMC, right? So level 1 is FCI. That's the federal contract information that you'll need to protect. 15 requirements there. They're actually in DFARS. Where we think most people need to be are level 2, and that's the 110 requirements out of NIST 800-171 Rev 2. Rev 3 is over the horizon. I know NIST released Rev 3 back over a year ago. That's going to require an amendment to rulemaking to make Rev 3 the CMMC standard. So it is not currently. So don't pay attention to that. You need to implement level 2. Both protect CUI, and then for the big integrators, for those nation-state cyber advanced persistent threats, they'll have to go through level 3 after they attain a level 2 from a CMMC third-party assessment organization with those 24 additional requirements from NIST 800-172. Every 3 years, you'll have to get your certification redone or renewed. And every year, you have to affirm that you're still maintaining those requirements, which I think Michael touched on. What's less known is, and we get the question, well, if I'm at level 2, how would I expect, depending on my contract, just to be required to do a self-assessment, or am I have to hire a C3PO? Because this bifurcation level 2 is something that DoD or DOW put in some time ago. There's actually additional guidance or insight on how they're going to do that. This is actually off a Pentagon slide. According to them, if you have CUI that's in the NARA, that's the National Archives and Records Administration, CUI registry, but it's not in the Defense Index group. You can see there, maybe it's not big enough. You can see all the different categories of CUI in NARA. If it's CUI but not in the defense category, you'll likely get only a self-assessment requirement. But if it's in the defense category, level 2 certification. I think most of you, if not all of you, should just assume you're going to be getting a C3PO level 2 contract clause. That's the safe way to go. Plan for that. I think that's the best advice I can give you, and not hope that you only have a self-assessment, because frankly, if you're self-assessing, you still need to make sure that you're doing it accurately. And if I were you, I'd still hire a C3PO to do a mock assessment, so at least you've got some good solid backup to your assertion. But as I mentioned, the False Claims Act, it's not just legal theory. We have a number of cases that the Department of Justice is prosecuting, and not prosecuting because it's not a criminal charge. False Claims Act or a civil procedure, but DOJ has that cyber civil task force to look to see what companies are not fulfilling their cybersecurity duties under the current DFARS 7012 clause. Georgia Tech just settled this about a month ago. They had whistleblowers that disclosed that Georgia Tech had been misreporting their SPRS score, their self-assessment score, cost them $875,000. From an organizational perspective, you might say, well, that's not backbreaking for a university. It's not, but the optics are not great at all. To be in the defense space, to support the Air Force and DARPA, and to say that you're going to not only talk the talk but walk the walk with your customers, and then not meet your requirements to protect their data, it's not a good look. I don't think it bodes well for winning additional contracts. Again, when these are settled, usually the company's not admitting any guilt because it's a civil settlement. Nonetheless, it's not a good look. Here's another one, Aero Turbine Incorporated, along with their private equity partner, Gallon Capital, a $1.75 million settlement. They too were shown not to be, or alleged not to be, fulfilling all the requirements of NIST 800-171 Revision 2. They self-reported once the whistleblowers came out and cooperated with the government, which is great to see. But still, so this is not just scare tactics that what could happen. It is happening. DOJ has resourced this, and in collaboration with DOW, they are looking out for that. So what does that mean for you? That means that it's time to get on board and be part of the CMMC ecosystem. And what do I say? What do I mean by that? Let me just kind of go through, because this is a great place where help can be found. At the top of this graphic, these are all different categories of people and organizations in the CMMC ecosystem that we oversee at the CyberAB. And for all of you, RPOs and RPs, the registered practitioners, they exist to help you prepare for CMMC, to help you with your SSP, to help you with your scoping, to help implement those security requirements before you present yourself to a third-party assessment organization or a C3PO, and that's in the yellow category. Those C3POs hire the people in the green, the CMMC certified assessors. That's a certified position. So if you're also out there in the audience looking to get involved in CMMC, and maybe you don't work for an OSC, you're just curious about how can I get involved, becoming a CCP, which is that apprentice level certified CMMC professional, and then certified assessor. It's a great way to contribute. It's a great, I think these positions are in high demand, so I think there is a good monetary reward in terms of what you could realize, whether it's a side hustle or full-time job. You could consider being an assessor. Those assessors are taught by the certified instructors or provisional instructors right now, and CMMC classes are delivered by the approved training providers that use the content from the approved publishing partners. So it's a whole ecosystem here to help you get started, help you to implement, and it'll eventually help you get your certification assessment completed successfully. So that's the ecosystem. But Sanjeev asked me to talk a little bit about what does it really take to get ready. It's more than just hiring an RP. You really need to ensure first that you are getting buy-in from your organization. This is not a conformity program that can be satisfied by some mid-level IT administrator working a few weekends to pull this all together. It needs buy-in from the C-suite. It needs buy-in from the client-facing parts of your organization that actually deal with the defense customers, because you need to understand how CUI comes into your organization. You need to understand who needs access to it and who doesn't. So the first step is really internally to help organize a collaborative effort within your company or organization to better understand what you need to do to conform to the CUI requirements. And then I would say the next most important, and it's a really important conversation to have, is one with your external service provider. More than likely, you are probably using one. It's really how the industry trend has gone. and it wasn't necessarily accommodated optimally when DoD started writing these rules, because MSPs and MSSPs, cloud service providers, certainly they were there, but they were not as prevalent and predominant in the DIB as they are now. There is no more important conversation you could have, because so much of what you need to conform to may be provided by your, what we call an ESP, that external service provider. And the first question you need to ask yourself is, what type of ESP are you using? And it's really important. There's a fork in the road. Is your provider a cloud service provider, or are they what we call an MSP or an MSSP, a managed security service provider? Because depending on how you answer that question is going to determine what requirements they have to assume in order to support your level 2 certification. If they're a cloud provider, then the standard for them, if they're storing, processing, or transmitting CUI, is going to be FedRAMP or FedRAMP moderate equivalency, something that the Prevail team knows very well, in fact, and really were the trailblazers in getting this done first. So your cloud provider, if they're storing, processing, transmitting CUI, has to have that FedRAMP credential. And if they're an MSP or an MSSP that's storing, processing, or transmitting CUI, then CMMC level 2 is likely what they're going to need. And how to determine if your ESP is a cloud provider is something I think that the rule didn't sufficiently address. So you really need to look at how NIST defines what cloud computing is. NIST 800-145, there's a lot of definitions. Is it software as a service? So we can't get into that here, but I just want to stress, talk to your cloud providers, talk to your MSSPs, understand what they're doing for you, and understand what their requirements have to be in order to get ready for that assessment. The other thing you need to do is probably get help. I talked about those RPOs and the practitioners. This is not really a journey you want to go it alone. There is help out there. You'd be very well advised to use it. And then it's really about getting yourself organized. You might want to do a mock assessment. C3POs can do mock assessments. Some RPOs are good at doing that as well. Get your SSP together. This is a lot of not just do you have the technology in place, do you have the policies in place? And the policies are often codified in documentation. Sometimes people roll their eyes and think, gosh, there's just so much paperwork and so much documentation we have to do for CMMC. Well, that's just because you have to establish how you're managing your environment, how you're protecting CUI, and that's often done through policies and procedures that have to be written down. So it's not a paperwork drill. It's you proving that you have a procedure, a process, a policy and doctrine on how your company manages this, because that's really what the assessors are looking for. It's not a checklist. They want to see, how does this organization inculcate their cybersecurity responsibilities, and how is that brought to life? How are these policies, procedures actually implemented, and are they being lived and breathed by all the people in the organization who need to follow them? That's what the documentation is about. So you have to have your documentation ready. You have to have your people ready, because when the C3PO comes in, I'll talk about here in a second, they're going to have to answer some questions. And so when you feel like you're ready, it's time to select that C3PO to do that certification assessment. And the best way to do that is go to our marketplace. Hopefully you use that to find those RPs and RPOs that have helped you at this point. But now you need to select a C3PO. And the question we often get is, well, how do I know which is the best one, and how much are they going to charge me? And those are two questions I cannot answer. One, because I'm prohibited from, as the accreditation body for all of them, I must treat all of them equally. And if they all meet our requirements and are authorized, then in our eyes, they're all in good standing, and all of them have the qualified people, have their own processes and procedures in place, have proven themselves to us that they, and the department, that they are worthy of this responsibility. Because in CMMC, it's the C3PO that's actually certifying your information system. It's not like FedRAMP, where the 3PO just does the report and mails it into the PMO office who makes the decision. They are the certifying officials. And so it's an important decision you make. And we encourage you to go to the marketplace, pick a few, contact them, and do some interviews, do some calls, find out where their expertise lies. Maybe they're very familiar with one type of platform, whether it's a Microsoft or a Google or an AWS, or not. Maybe they're very well versed in assessing manufacturers, but maybe not as well versed in assessing service companies supporting the Department of War. So have a discussion and use your own decision criteria about which one you want to select. It is a market-based cadre. So they all have competitive pricing. We don't have a limitation on what they can charge. If it comes to our attention that there are some bargain basement C3POs that are essentially acting as certificate mills, we will get involved then in our responsibility to ensure the integrity of the assessment process. But it's really something for you to make that business decision on the C3PO you hire. So then we get into, you're ready, you've hired a C3PO. What's the process like? We publish one document that's part of the CMMC canon, which is called the CMMC assessment process. And in that, we have different phases of the assessment. That first phase is for the C3PO to determine, along in concert with you, are you actually ready for the assessment? Because maybe you didn't hire an RPO, or maybe you didn't do a mock assessment. The C3PO needs to look at your SSP. They need to look at your scoping. Does that make sense to them in terms of how you've bounded your network and the assets that are within it? Do you have evidence that's going to be ready for them to evaluate when it's time to get to phase 2? And so phase 1 goes well, and both parties agree that we should proceed with the evaluation. Then the C3PO is going to upload that pre-assessment form to EMAS, which is the Pentagon's IT system of record for CMMC. And then you begin phase 2, and that might occur the next week or a couple weeks down the road. But generally, that C3PO, it's going to probably start through a virtual meeting where they're going to be going really just down the list, all 320 assessment objectives. And they're either going to look to see evidence as in terms of a documentation or a policy. They might ask you to demonstrate or test something in terms of a technology, show me that this actually works. Or they might want to interview your people and ask questions. Those are the 3 evaluation methods: test, examine, and interview to determine if that security requirement is being met. And so they'll be going through all 320, and they'll probably at the end of each day, they're required to hold kind of a daily review on how things are going. And at that point, they might say, well, right now, this requirement, we're not sure about it, may be trending not met. We're going to need to see additional documentation, or we'll come back to that tomorrow. So they'll give you a sense on how things are going. But eventually, as you get through all of the objectives, there'll be an out brief, and you will either be certified with a final level 2 certification certificate. You've got a POAM that is above the score 88. To get that POAM, you're going to get a conditional certificate, which gives you full authority to be awarded DoD contracts. You're just going to make sure you have to clear that POAM and get a final certification from a SIG-3PO. It could be the same one, could be a different one within 180 days. And if you do not get certified, if you do not pass the assessment, you certainly have rights to appeal. That first appeal goes back to the corporate C3PO, who'll be required to stand up an appeals panel that does not consist of the people who actually assessed you. That appeals panel will render their decision. And if you or the C3PO assessment team doesn't like that decision, then they will appeal that decision to us. And then we will set up an independent appeals panel to adjudicate whether or not, was there a technical misinterpretation? Was there an error by the assessor? Was there any violation of the code of professional conduct? All of those things that we'll look at. And hopefully by the end of this process, you will get your level 2 CMMC certificate final status, which is an actual certificate that'll have the C3PO official sign, and that you will have with all the cage codes that are affiliated with that information system. It's a distinction to make that it's not really the company that gets certified at CMMC, it's the information system. So it's important that you're giving your C3PO all those cage codes. They must be accurate cage codes, because SPRS will spit them back out and not accept the certification if there is a, if there's a typo, or if you're using a cage code that's been retired and is not currently in SAM.gov. So please make sure your cage codes are well inventoried. But if you're successful, you get that certificate, and you're going to have to go in and then affirm in SPRS that you are certified, and that you're going to maintain the conditions under which you're certified. And you're going to go back and do that, as I said earlier, on an annual basis. So that's generally how the process works, and it has been working pretty well now since earlier this year. These are the early movers who recognize that, one, there's probably a market benefit to going ahead and getting assessed and certified now, even though that Title 48 rule is not in place. And we see continued increase in the amount of companies going ahead and jumping in the pool and getting that certification assessment done. We expect once Title 48 comes into force, there'll be more momentum for companies to go ahead and get certified now. And we expect this ecosystem to continue to grow from that increased demand signal. I'll leave with a final note, which I kind of touched on at the beginning. You can look at this as a compliance program that government is making you do these things. That's the wrong way to look at it. This is a conformity program, and the distinction really only matters to people like me in the ISO world. But I do think it has a practical application in terms of how you view this. This is you proving to the department that you are a worthy business partner. They have set a standard that they need you to attain in order to be their business partner. And what the assessors are there to do from those C3POs is to assess, do you meet the standard? They're not there to go through a checklist and just check stuff off like an audit or an inspection. It really is an assessment. We have to assess, are you meeting the department's standard for protecting CUI and for implementing basic cyber hygiene? And if you meet that standard, you are good to go. This is the tip of the conformity spear in my mind. You already see other departments and agencies, I think, waiting to see CMMC get up and running. You see the FAR CUI rule that has been dormant for a number of years and emerged earlier this year. So I do think you're going to see a continued momentum for GovCon business partners at the federal, state, local level. We're seeing states come on board with their own requirements. We're seeing other countries. This is a global program, so CMMC actually is an international program. This is the wave of the future. So you can kind of bite your tongue and say, I really don't want to do this, but I'm being forced to. Or you can say that this is how really risk is going to be managed moving forward, from business to business, from business to client, and within organizations themselves. So it's best to jump in, embrace this, because without a collective trust on how we share information in the digital age with AI, 5G, 6G, quantum computing, I shudder to think what the world will look like without rigorous cybersecurity, which is what CMMC is trying to encourage. So, Sanjeev, I'll stop there. I hope I hit all the points, but I'm just grateful for the audience that you provided, because I know you guys draw well for your annual summits, and thanks for the invitation. And really
Yeah,
appreciate the
well,
time.
as always, Matt, super clear. For those that have been listening, I mean, you couldn't have been clearer in your exposition and building upon what Matt said. I just want to go and kind of give one kind of folksy summary of like, why is this necessary? And you kind of look at it and say, hey, listen, I mean, if you think about our adversaries, and I'm not going to name them, and you think about them saying, okay, they have defense systems that they are building, etc. And if they had no rules and regulations for ensuring how well those guys are protecting sensitive information, what do you think our agencies are going to do who are tasked with attacking them? Would they just say, well, it's not gentlemanly of us to kind of go and poke our nose into their systems? So that's exactly what we would do, and that's what they're going to do to us, and that's why the regulation on protecting information is required. I also want to kind of summarize three key points that you made. One was that if you look at CMMC, there's three things. One is systems to protect the CUI. One is information, which is documentation. And the third is basically, going through assessments and finding the right C3PO. And this is the only time I'm going to go and say to the audience over here that in all these three systems, providing these systems to go protect your information, we provide the information development tools, like the documentation tools. And to Matt's important question, how do you select a C3PAO? One of the criteria is, do they understand, the systems that, we're using? Are they familiar with them? And so to that end, our customers, we go and say, hey, well, here are C3POs that have done assessments. And as Matt pointed out, there's 200, 300 assessments that have been done. 50 or more of them are Prevail customers, so we got a lot of early experience with it. And for attendees, there will be Prevail folks available on the sidelines to assist you with it. So I want to thank you again, Matt. But before we go to the next session, I want to just take a special moment over here. You know, I want to take this moment to honor someone who has profoundly shaped this community, and his name is Robert Metzger. Robert was, as you know, Matt, and others perhaps that are attending, not only one of the most brilliant legal minds in cybersecurity and defense contracting, but also one of the kindest spirits. He helped demystify CMMC and make it accessible for thousands of defense contractors. He was a true teacher, a mentor to many, a friend to all, and a tireless advocate for this ecosystem. Robert passed away this year, and his absence is deeply felt. And all of us in the ecosystem honor him today for his intellect, his generosity, and the legacy of clarity and integrity that he leaves behind. So, again, wherever you are, Robert, thank you so very much for all that you have done.